Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. Following the US military strikes and capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, India has taken a neutral, cautious stance. The Ministry of External Affairs expressed deep concern over recent developments, stating we are closely monitoring the evolving situation. India reaffirms its support for the well-being and safety of the people of Venezuela. We call upon all concerned to address issues peacefully through dialogue, ensuring peace and stability of the region. Notably, India has avoided naming the US or condemning the action outright, unlike Brazil, Mexico or Russia. The MEA has also issued a travel advisory urging Indians to avoid non-essential travel to Venezuela and exercise caution. This balanced approach aligns with India's non-aligned policy, prioritizing de-escalation and citizen safety without endorsing or strongly opposing the US operation. Joining us live at this point is Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India. Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador Sibal. Do you believe that the US can justify capturing of the Venezuelan president in the manner that they did? What do you make of this move yesterday?
No, they can't. It is in total violation of the UN Charter, international law, the so-called rules-based order. There is no UN sanction. There is no Chapter 7 resolution, which would then enjoin upon member states to take military action. In every way, it is a complete violation.
What do you think would change in the world if the US gets access to Venezuelan oil, which obviously Trump has indicated they want to?
Well, that is the declared objective of President Trump, to get hold of Venezuelan oil. Venezuela has the largest reserves in the world. And if the United States gets hold of all of Ukrainian oil, then it will control almost 20% of global oil, which means that it will become the arbiter of pricing and availability and everything else. So the whole oil politics will change. The other thing is that the US refineries on the East Coast are all geared for refining heavy Venezuelan oil. Shale oil is very light, so they're not geared for that. So it would actually therefore mean a big bonanza for the United States, as they would be able then to refine the oil and flood the international market with refined oil. So there are big stakes, economic stakes, that the United States has had and continues to have in Venezuelan oil. And it will be a big issue with regard to global oil politics if US succeeds in putting its hands on Venezuelan oil through the means that they have adopted, which are totally illegal.
Do you think that Europe's silence in Venezuela as compared to them supporting Ukraine shows their double standards?
Well, of course, there's nothing new. They have been showing double standards all these years. This is quite clear. Now, their entire position on Ukraine and on Russia has effectively politically collapsed because they have been very mealy-mouthed. And in fact, they've gone out of their way in some cases to support what President Trump has done. The Chancellor of Germany said it's very complex, we need time to think. The French president has spoken very strongly against Maduro and his tenure and his illegitimacy. And the European Union has done the same. Now they're very embarrassed because what Trump has done is far worse than what Putin has done. And tomorrow, if Putin gets hold of Zelensky through a military operation and brings him up for trial in Moscow, what will Europe say? So they are caught in a very difficult position of their own making, because they went too far in demonizing Russia and closing all doors of a dialogue. and they have been undermined by President Trump's action in Venezuela. And now they cannot attack President Trump because President Trump already has put Europe in a very difficult position by going over his head to negotiate a peace deal in Ukraine with Russia, quite apart from making direct attacks on the future of Europe, supporting right-wing forces in Europe, expressing opposition to the European Union as a bloc. And then Trump has sights on Greenland. The wife of the deputy chief of staff of the White House has put something on X, which says that next target is Greenland and Mexico and Colombia. Now, if he does that in Greenland, then what does Europe do?
Yes, do you believe then also that this action, Ambassador Sibal, will lead to an escalation of the global geopolitical tensions, which anyways are at a heightened state at this point, given the other conflicts on?
Well, there can be many. Of course, in the worst case scenario, I don't think it's going to happen. It sort of opens the doors to China to do something with Taiwan. And also, whatever restraint United States and Europe wanted to put on Russia, or the process of negotiations between United States and Russia on handling the Ukraine conflict, that has been undermined totally. Because if United States takes this kind of an action in Venezuela, without Venezuela seeking military alliances with anybody, without being the base for any proxy war against United States, without it being in any way a danger to the security of the United States, if US could do that unilaterally to Venezuela, then other countries can do the same, not necessarily the big countries like China or Russia, but even smaller countries which are involved in disputes with neighbors and this and that. And if relatively they are strong, they can take this unilateral action and start kidnapping the heads of state of countries, which actually is totally contrary to the Vienna Convention on diplomatic relations. The heads of state have immunity for the actions that they take. But this has been disregarded by the United States.
Do you then expect China to invade Taiwan soon, seizing this opportunity? Is that something you're expecting? You've hinted at that.
No, I don't. Well, I can't speak on behalf of China, but I think they would not necessarily do that because the kind of operation United States has launched against Venezuela is of a very different order than what China may confront in Taiwan. Taiwan is well armed. It has defense ties with the United States. Japan has already announced that any Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be a security challenge to Japan, forcing it to intervene. So there, the United States has bases, has military personnel, has defense commitments. So China would think twice before it launches that kind of a physical military invasion of Taiwan. So they may still rely on continuing to intimidate Taiwan or building up a deterrence against the United States,
yes,
which they are successfully building up, and bide their time because they've given themselves until 2049 or 2050 to make Taiwan an integral part of China. So they may not be in that kind of a hurry.
And my final question then to you before we let you go, how does US action then impact the global law and order in the long run, if at all?
It does. It does because it is now, we've gone back to this phase of US unilateralism, which we saw after the collapse of the Soviet Union, number one. Number two, that if United States can violate international law with
Yes.
such impunity, what is there to stop others from doing so when they have differences and quarrels and conflicts with other countries? So a precedent has been created,
Okay.
a very bad precedent, where even the heads of state are fair targets for direct political and military action. Uh, so the norms have been destabilized and violated in such a severe manner
Right.
that the repercussions would be long term. And then, of course, the entire discourse of double standards, which the rest of the world, especially the global south, has been pointing out
Okay.
to the West. Now, that feeling that there are double standards, that one standard applies to these countries, the Western countries, which can do as they please in violating international law. If somebody else from the global south or does it, then it is a violation of human rights and international law, and UN Charter, and what have you. So this will create, and this is creating already a very big gap between the West and the rest.
Okay.
This will, in due course, definitely uh, promote, the entire effort to create a more multipolar world, to make sure that there is effective
Okay.
dispersal of power in the system,
Okay.
and that the rest can stand up
All
to
right.
the West.
All right. Ambassador
More
Sibal, I'm
and
going to
more.
leave it at that. Appreciate you joining us with your perspective on that big story. Sumit Peer, political commentator, is also joining us now live. Sumit, now from an Indian point of view, how should we view the this action by the US in Venezuela? Also, the oil ramifications for India. What are those going to be? India's, of course, issued a pretty cautious statement, a measured statement. We've urged restraint, although taken a pretty neutral stand so far.
Uday, thank you for having me on your show. What India did is pretty good because we are neutral. We have not opposed it. We have not supported it. We are concerned about the people. We are concerned about the safety of our people. And we are saying you should resolve it by discussions and deliberations. That is the best and the most apt part to take. And that is where the diplomacy will come in because, military did what they had to do. Now the diplomats will come and, let the dust settle it. And that's what India is doing. As far as what America did, Uday, if I look at from American perspective, look, you have $38.6 trillion of debt. You get hold of Venezuelan oil, you get $25 trillion same day. 330 billion barrels of oil, multiply it by 72, the prevailing price is $70. Though I'm talking of 24, 25 trillion, you're left with $9 trillion of debt. That is at the economy of $30 trillion approximately. That is 30% of your GDP. Your economy was sinking, it was going down the drain. You did a military operation which lasted for 3.5 hours. None of your men got killed. None of your men got injured. You took you took the prime guy. You got the country. You got the oil. You got everything what you wanted. From Trump's perspective, he says it's a great day for America and the Americans to celebrate. Yes, I violated all the rules. Yes, this is not as per the UN Charter. This is not as per the rules of the game. एक हिंदी में कहावत है ना, जिसकी लाठी उसकी भैंस. This is the new normal, and this is how it is going to be in the other countries to come. If you don't have a very powerful army, then your vulnerability becomes much, much many-folder. And Marco Rubio issuing direct threats to Cuba, to Mexico, and to Colombia. And now people are talking of Greenland, people are talking here and there, but Marco Rubio directly issued a threat to these three countries, and even Khamenei in Iran. They've directly called out Khamenei. Pete Hegseth was comparing what happened in Venezuela with what they're possibly going to do in Iran. So it is the new normal, Uday, we have to live with, and this is the new reality of the life. But
Okay.
what they did is fantastic. In a 3.5 hours at zero cost, you got $25 trillion in your back. That's how I look at it.
Ambassador Muni, how are you viewing this unprecedented action by the United States of America and what its fallout really is going to be on that entire region now? Of course, question marks on what happens next in Venezuela as well. For now, the Vice President has taken charge. The US obviously hinting that they want to play a role in governing the country till a suitable transition happens. A suitable transition, obviously, a dispensation that will suit Donald Trump and the US. What is this? How is this going to impact that entire region, according to you?
Well, I think firstly, it is not very, very unprecedented. The US has been doing it all along. They did it in Iraq, they did it in Libya, they did it in various other countries. Regime change has been one of the known and declared policy of the US. But this is rather barbaric because it shows two things. It plays the concept of sovereignty to its deathbed. There is no sovereignty, which is a principle accepted by the world for mutual engagement and mutual relationship. Secondly, it really marks the very grotesque rise of imperialism, in which you want to do whatever you want to do because you have the power to do that. I accept that this is a international relations has always been the option law that anybody who can dictate terms to others will go and dictate for its own interest. But it was never so brutal. I mean, we have lived for almost 60 to 70 years in a relatively peaceful and orderly world. And the dialogue and claims of a rule-based order is all gone into the dustbin of history. So it is an action which is not at all approvable by anybody, even for economic reasons. I have some economic reasons, or India has an economic reasons in Bangladesh or Nepal. So we go and occupy it without any cost. We can do that, so we should do that. Firstly, secondly, we shall go and pick up the president and take him as a prisoner without any rhyme or reason. The guy who has been elected thrice, which somehow have been accepted by his own people. So, in look at it in any respect, there is absolutely no justification either for economic reasons of the US or whatever else you call it, migration or drugs or whatever other excuses which they are making up. Secondly, I want to say that I'm all right with India's position of neutrality and objectivity. But I am slightly worried about this kind of a position, which looks only at your narrow interest and not in the global order. On the one hand, we are saying that we are now a big player in global order, that we are a big representative of the global south, and yet we take this kind of a wishy-washy stand. India has said we are deeply concerned. Concerned for what? Concerned for the death of sovereignty, concerned for the death of the international order, laws, principles, whatever else in the United Nations, concerned for what? So this is what the big question is. I think somewhere we should have said, even without naming the United States, I understand there are constraints and strategic factors on that. Even without saying that, we should have said that the violations of these principles is not on and we should not accept it. I know that strategically Indian policymakers must be somewhat happy that
Yes.
in Venezuela the Chinese influence will now go out, but this also puts us in isolation in the BRICS or the global south, which we have been talking so loudly.
Okay.
So I think it is generally all right in terms of narrow national interest, but in terms of a wider, if you want to be a Vishwa Guru and all that, then this is not in order at all.
All right, let me in fact quickly address some more breaking inputs now coming in. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has issued a statement. He said the US is ready to work with the Venezuelan remaining leaders if they make quote unquote the right decisions. Moreover, Rubio has stated the US is going to judge everything by what they do and the US will see then what they do. So obviously, he's the one. Raymond Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, if I can rope you in here. Raymond Vickery, the Trump administration has appointed Marco Rubio as being the one in charge of this Venezuelan transition government. He's the one who has to speak with the oil companies, the players within Venezuela, and of course, the top echelons of the Trump administration too, and run this temporary government in Venezuela. Marco Rubio saying the U.S. is ready to work with Venezuelan leaders if they make the right choices and decisions. What are we to make of that?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It seems to me that if you're going to wage peace, you have to wage it like war, and that is you must have a strategy, you must have partners, and you have principles. Unfortunately, the U.S. Action in regard to Venezuela really doesn't have any of these. It's a throwback to the 19th century of might makes right and imperialism. It seems to me that India should play a larger role here as a leading democracy in the world. Unfortunately, India has done just what it did in regard to Russia and Ukraine, in regard to Israel and Gaza, and basically say, well, our narrow interest or our interest, it's India first, and we don't have a real dog in this fight. In fact, we all have a dog in this fight because peace and prosperity are inseparable. When it comes to Marco Rubio, it's plain that Marco Rubio, with his roots in Cuba, has in mind a so-called liberation of Cuba and an incorporation of Venezuela, Cuba, and the rest of Latin America as a quasi-empire of the United States. The 20th century has shown that if you let the world dissolve into empires, United States in the Western Hemisphere, Russia in Europe, China in Asia, these empires rub up against each other, and the history of the 20th century is it results in generalized war. So it is time for India and other great democracies and people throughout the world who are interested in the principles of the UN Charter to act together to provide some sort of restraint from this downward spiral which has been aided by the Trump administration and this latest action in regard to Venezuela.
Absolutely. Now, Raymond Vickery, if I just ask you a quick follow-up question on what is expected next. What do you believe is expected next now in that neighborhood, in that region? And what really is this Donroe doctrine now going to be going ahead?
Yes, it will go ahead. And the logic is one of empire. And as I said, it's a throwback to the 19th century, which results in hostilities and instability. But it has been made very clear, the Senora Machado, who won the Nobel Peace Prize and was duly elected as president of Venezuela, has basically been thrown under the bus by the Trump administration. And they have in view that they can basically sit on top of sort of a puppet government headed by Ms. Rodriguez, the vice president, and control the oil. And as
so you believe
Trump
she's going to toe their line? You believe she's going to toe their line?
No, I don't believe she's going to toe the line. And I believe that there is no plan B. I don't believe that there is a strategy or a well thought out way to go forward. The history of the United States and Latin America has not been pretty in regard to interventions. It has been a history of, well, if they don't agree, send in the Marines. That didn't work in Nicaragua. It hasn't worked in many of instances in the Western Hemisphere. But there is no plan B. There's no strategy here other than self-aggrandizement and our way or the highway, might makes right, all in derogation of what has kept the peace and the United States has been a leader of since World War II. So it's time for India and other democracies to wake up to this and provide some constraint on the Trump administration and this lawless approach, not only to international affairs, but here domestically, as he sends in troops to various cities, as he attacks the judiciary, as he says the media is the enemy of the people, and derogates democracy across the board.
All right. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. We've run out of time. We're slipping into a very short break. Much more coming up on the other side.